just the facts, ma'am.
First of all, the major concern that I have is that it is what I call the pork barrel stimulus bill. It is not targeted to help the people in the most need. And frankly, I think the stimulus that they put through in December with Trump's help was probably poorly designed also. So it's not necessarily I'm banging on Biden about this, but I want to point out the hypocrisy of the people that are promoting this. First of all, Trump asked for a stimulus bill last summer, and he pled for it, and he argued for it. And the infamous lobotomized Nancy Pelosi said, well, I'm not going to let this come up for a vote, because she knew that it would pass because her constituents wanted it. So she held off until after the election. And then they put through this bill, why Trump is a lame duck, that is going to hurt the economy. It's part of a $3 trillion bill. So you keep hearing 900 billion was the stimulus part, but it was a $3 trillion bill. So they're spending money like a bunch of crazy people, a bunch of drunks up there. And then they want to say, come back and then say, oh, but we really need more stimulus. So we need $1.9 trillion. First of all, I don't know how anybody comes up with a number like that. But one of the things I do know is that this bill is full of pork. You can make bacon off just the residue of this bill, and it needs to be stopped. Fortunately, the Republicans are pretty close to 50-50 in the House. They are 50-50 with one vote missing in the Senate, and they are saying, guys, this is really not a good idea. And I'm hoping a couple Democratic senators will agree. But part of my concern is we're talking about doing this with borrowed money. And Janet Yellen was just confirmed as the new Secretary of the Treasury. And I think Yellen is probably a reasonably competent individual. But I've got some real concerns because she's out there yelling and hollering and saying, look, money's cheap right now. Who cares about $1.9 trillion? Let's go ahead and do it and stimulate the economy. So the stock market actually went up. The problem is all good things must come to an end. And when you borrow money, no matter what happens in life, you have to pay it back. And one of the problems with the US debt is that periodically it has to be refinanced. You have to sell new bonds to replace old bonds that you've paid off. And guess what? Interest rates are at historic lows, mostly artificially due to Fed stimulus for so many years, starting with the recession that started under George W. Bush, continued all the way through the Obama administration, ended briefly during the Trump administration, but then they didn't raise rates like they should have. So, and of course, about the time they would start to raise rates was last February when we ran into the COVID pandemic and the economy tanked. So they said, oh, but we can't raise interest rates now. So it is a clearly false concept that just because money is cheap this week, that we should go out and borrow even more money after all of the deficit spending that we've done. What does that lead to? It leads to the number one devastation of an economy, and that is called inflation. And folks, I remember the 70s. I remember the failed administration of Jimmy Carter. Yes, good old Jimmy Carter. What was his bugaboo? He couldn't control inflation. So we can get back, and I think the Biden administration, with killing the Keystone Pipeline, flooding the country with illegal aliens, cutting off sensible programs, and continuing deficit spending, this is a package designed to suddenly cause inflation. Who loses money in inflation? Poor people. That dollar loaf of bread becomes a $1.50 loaf of bread. That $2 gallon of gasoline becomes a $3 gallon of gasoline, and on and on and on. And there's no end in sight. And it is very difficult to control inflation. It took 10 years for the United States to bring inflation under control last time that we had a severe inflation crisis from the 1970s. And I'm not just blaming Jimmy Carter. He inherited high inflation. He couldn't deal with it. He did his best, and I don't fault him for that. But I'm just saying that once it starts, it's extremely difficult to control. And I think we need to be very careful out there. So I oppose the new stimulus bill. I do not impose very targeted relief for the people who need it the most. This is not the bill, at least the bill that they've got on the table. And that's what's in the news today.